Welcome to part 2 of the H.A.R.D process with 277. In this video, we will be looking at the asking questions phase of that H.A.R.D process, the A in the H.A.R.D acronym. As with all of our training videos, we will be breaking this down into 2 short videos. In part 1, we will be looking at the behaviours and characteristics that your team will be displaying during this stage of their journey as a new group. And remember, a new group can be newly formed, where everybody involved is new to the group, or it can be a new dynamic to the group, where somebody has been added or even removed from that group. In section 2, we will look at how we can lead that group to be high performers as often as possible, and the tools and skills that we can apply to get maximum results and achieve high performance more often. The asking questions phase. This is where resistance kicks in. Now, it's really important to remember that this stage can happen more than once. In fact, it will happen more than once. Once you've put the hard work in as a group and as a leader and got yourself through this asking question phase, it's really important that you don't feel that you failed when you fall back into it as a group, or individuals within the group start falling back into this asking question phase. When we understand that as leaders, it is a huge opportunity to create solidarity, sustainability, and a platform for success within the team. Some of the signs that we are going through this stage could well be that you're taking a team meeting, or you're delivering some information, or you're overseeing or observing somebody else in the team delivering information, and it's that time where there's tumbleweeds. There's a silence. We're having to prod and probe and encourage people to give feedback that was really forthcoming in that first stage of the high interest, high motivation, high energy stage. Now we're having to almost squeeze it out of people that previously were just fighting to give us all of their feedback and information. If we see this, no panic. It's absolutely normal, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. But we can recognise that we're starting to go through what some might call a honeymoon period, that high interest, high energy, high eagerness phase. And now people are starting to feel settled, and they're starting to ask questions that may have even been in there for a little bit longer than just today when they're asking it. And that again is absolutely fine. One of the most common traits at this stage is that people start to identify differences between themselves and people within the group, rather than the influences that they were finding before. So we call it differences over influences. When people are really positive and in a good place, and they will get back to that place with your leadership, it will happen. When you get back to that place, people are back to looking at people for influence, inspiration. They're prepared to take advice and guidance and suggestions from others. It's never a problem. But when we're sitting in this asking questions phase, what's very common is for people to just pick out differences. He doesn't do that. She doesn't do those hours. He's not doing these shifts. He's not picking up that piece of work when it comes through. There's a lot of differences being highlighted, and they're not being highlighted in a positive way in this stage. It can create a competition between teammates that isn't healthy. Healthy competition can take us to a new level, and let's hope that we get that quite quickly. But in this stage, the competition that's being created is unhealthy. It's people wanting to get one up on others. It's people trying to get others in trouble. It's people trying to pick fault in each other to make themselves look better. As the saying goes, there's 2 ways to have the biggest building. One is to build the biggest building. The other is to pull everybody else's down. And in this stage, people are pulling everybody else's buildings down. None of these stages are consistent all day, every day. One stage will always be more prominent within the group dynamic than another. And in that moment, we need to react accordingly. And we'll cover those skills and those leadership traits in the next video of part 2. Emotions are elevated in this phase. People have come in on a high. People have been really excited to be a part of this group, part of this journey, whether it's a completely new group or a new dynamic of a group. People have been excited, eager, full of motivation, and the energy's been high. At this stage, the elevation is in the emotions. Things that were a minor issue previously are now a big issue. Things that people weren't picking up on before are now becoming front and center of a conversation that maybe is distracting from what you need them to be focusing on for the business to be successful. This needs leadership, this needs awareness, and this needs people within the team to understand the processes as well as you do, so that they can recognise it in themselves, smile and correct it before it becomes an issue for the group. That's the long game, and things like this video will help you get to that stage. I'd relate it to, if we're going to associate it with how we are when we're in childhood, a lot of childish behaviour and the bottom lip's coming out. A lot of people are feeling sad. There's that poor me mentality, where a lot of the things that people are feeling hard done by about are things that previously were like water off a duck's back. So we just need to get them back to that place where they are high performing and the water is just running off their back. And as leaders, we can do that. What we did in the early stages, the high interest stage, the high energy stage, the high eagerness stage, and through the interview process and anything else that went on to create this group, we would have set out the outlines of every single part of the puzzle that we are creating and the outcomes that we're looking for. At this stage, the analogy I'd suggest is that you visualize people starting to colour in those lines. And people are starting to have a difference of opinion on how this can look and which colours we should use and how close to each line we should get. People need a little bit of guidance and maybe some clarification on the boundaries to make sure that everybody knows their role again and people aren't taking the opportunity to flex where they shouldn't be flexing and create a problem for the team dynamic. Those are the stages to expect in the asking questions phase. All of these will come out as questions. There's a lot of why, how, who, but what we're going to look at in the next part of this video, part 2 of part 2, is how do we as leaders apply some quick wins into this dynamic to make sure that we move to the next stage of the hard process, which is where we start to see results. But make sure you watch part 2, because without that, those results will either not come or they won't stay.